We did have a doctor who like slammed his hand in a car, and he went on a claim for that. But it's easy to see why a surgeon who uses their hands all the time would want this type of coverage, because you could receive total disability benefits on this policy and still work. But even a family medicine or psychiatrist, you don't want to sell themselves short that these policies could potentially pay those benefits while you're able to work somewhere else.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. Alex Schloe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Physicians and Properties Podcast. And if you're a physician chasing financial freedom through real estate or entrepreneurship, your biggest asset isn't necessarily your portfolio. It's actually your ability to earn as a practicing physician. Financial freedom might be a few properties away, but disability can wipe out that plan overnight if you're not protected. And so I'm really excited today to have Aaron Brooker on the podcast. Aaron is an incredible individual. He's a world traveler, a former educator, dad of 3 young boys, super intentional when it comes to fatherhood. And he works for LeverageRx in regards to disability insurance, specifically working with physicians. So really excited to have you on the podcast tonight. Aaron, how are things going?
Alex, thanks for having me. Things are, average. I'm happy to be here. That's above average. Everything else is just maintaining at a good level. You take the good with the bad.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sticking through some of the technology issues that we had getting started, but I'm excited to have this podcast. And as you mentioned before the podcast, got 3 young boys, we might see an appearance. So that'll be awesome if that happens. But if not, it's all good.
They've been informed to stay quiet. I'm not worried about that. Mostly I'm just hoping we make it through the rest of the podcast without any technology issues.
There you go. I think we can do that. Well, I gave you a brief introduction. Do you mind telling folks a little bit about yourself as well as kind of how you got started in this space?
Alex, that was actually a great introduction. Thank you. So I live in Nebraska, born and raised in Nebraska, been here the whole time, and I actually went to college to be an educator, a middle school educator, which, I just don't know what's walking through the door. You got to be ready for a lot of things. To be honest, I enjoyed education a lot because of the summers. And so I grinded through as a teacher for 14 years. And you know what they give you if you do a good job teaching? You get another committee to be in charge of. And 2 teachers quit. Another teacher was having a baby. I was doing everybody's job with long-term subs. It was the first year where I was like, just not proud of the product we were putting in front of these kids. And a sales opportunity opened up, 8 years ago for disability insurance for physicians with a different agency here in town. And I gave that a go, did a good job, moved over to LeverageRx a few years ago. And so for the last, 8 years, I've been dealing exclusively just as an online broker with physician disability insurance.
That's awesome. And as I mentioned before, we got started here and pushed record. I don't know a whole lot about disability insurance. It's definitely something that I overlooked, and I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening to the podcast have probably overlooked as well. And excited to talk more about that. But you mentioned you're a world traveler, and you mentioned summers off as a teacher. So I got to ask, what was your favorite place that you ever traveled to?
It's definitely Egypt is number 1 on the list. When I, one summer I backpacked Europe with a buddy. And so we hit up, 12 or 13 countries, which was not on the itinerary. We were hanging out in Greece and he said, we should go to Egypt. And I was like, we weren't planning on doing that. But somehow before the, smartphone era, we bought plane tickets on the little island from Athens to Cairo, got to Athens, flew I literally had a Lonely Planet tour guide of Egypt. And that was what we showed up in Egypt with for 2 weeks. And you made it work. And so that was the most fun travel we had. My wife and I also, we overland safaried from Cape Town to Kenya. So that was 8 weeks, 9 countries in Africa. And so That's the bulk of the travel. I'm going to the DR Saturday here, I guess, just a week of kind of hiking along the mountains. So, something to be grateful for. Have you read Die with Zero?
Yeah, Bill Perkins, great book. Really interesting book. I was going to bring this up later on in the podcast because you had mentioned it, but it is an interesting book, especially in kind of the FIRE age of financial independence, retire early, and 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗍, kind of how they work together, but also kind of conflict was really interesting. And I love his mentality of like, hey, wow, we're young. Like we need to be doing all the traveling, all the experiences, frankly, spending the money that we earn to have those times and experiences, and we can enjoy it when we're healthy enough to do the hiking trips and the backpacking trips, and our kids still like us and so forth. So a really great book. What were your thoughts? What were your insights from 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗍?
Well, we read that, and my wife kind of felt like it was a green light to just take a lot more trips, when we had opportunities to, which I'm not complaining about. Part of what kind of drew me out of education was just a big interest in personal finance. And, I realized there just had to be some more opportunities. So I've been playing catch up, for the last 7 years, I feel like in some ways. Maybe like some of the residents feel like, hey, I've been in school for all this time and now finally there's a salary we can work with. But the FIRE mentality says like, hey, every dollar that you don't save is time you got to work for somebody else. The 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗍 guys like, hey, every dollar you don't spend is opportunities you missed out on, right? You could have had nicer dinners, or you could have taken more trips, or you could have worked less, when your kids were young. And so it's like the same side, like different sides of the same coin, where you both have to be very intentional about your time and your budget and your money. And that's what I kind of liked about it, is like, man, hey, we are probably missing out on some good opportunities right now because we're just laser focused on saving. And so it kind of like just opened up some freedom to feel okay about experiences.
Yeah, I agree. That's one thing that we as a family don't have any trouble spending money on. And my buddy Brian Lubin, he hosts the Action Academy podcast. He said something a few years back he calls it the 10-year rule. And essentially it's like, if there's a trip or an experience or something you want to buy, and in 10 years you're going to be sitting around the bonfire telling that story and you can reasonably afford it, then you need to do it, And so it's kind of like right in the middle of 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗍 and FIRE. And so that's something that we've really tried to do, is like, hey, if we have an opportunity for incredible experience or trip, or we bought a camper a few years back, that was the best investment I've ever made. I've talked about that a lot on the podcast because it's just such a cool experience. But and we spent a month in the camper this summer. We spent a month in Europe this summer, and man, those are the best 2 months of the year. And so
what kind of camper?
Yeah. We have a small 19-foot camper. It's hard side. We're in Colorado, so hard sided campers are nice when it gets really cold, or to keep some of the creatures out. And so we got it used off Facebook Marketplace. My wife is an amazing designer, and my mother-in-law flew out from Virginia, and next thing I know, my wife and my mother-in-law just like completely renovated this camper. It was awesome. And so really grateful for that. And we've done tons of great trips in that. Our goal is to spend at least 30 days in the camper every year. And we've done that for the 3 years that we've had it. Or 30 days. Yeah, it's been awesome.
That takes work. I had camper. I actually rented out motorhomes for a period of time on Outdoorsy. And you guys are dealing with rentals, man. Try sending somebody in a Class A motorhome out of your driveway that's never camped before. That's not for the faint of heart, That's a different level of risk tolerance. But good for you. We like to camp. My friend has a YouTube channel where he reviews small campers, and he's quite successful at it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Have you read the book? Sorry, one last one. Intentional Father?
I don't think so. Is that the one by John Tyson?
It is, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I have. Yep, I have. Great book.
Your kids are a little bit young for that, but it's just like kind of what you're already thinking is like, hey, culture doesn't give our boys a really rite of passage the way some other cultures do. And so you have to, kind of curate media and curate activities to just celebrate that growing up and maturing into manhood. So I think camping is a great way to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so interesting. The more time that we spend out there, initially, like you can tell, at least myself, I'm definitely a type A, like a little bit of an anxious person. And when we first get out there, I'm like, oh man, like I feel the weight of like all these things I think I should be doing. And then I sit around the fire with my family, and like by the second night, I'm like, this is the dream. Like nothing else matters, and we try to go places where we don't have cell phone service for that reason as well, and just completely disconnect. And so it is great. But yeah, Intentional Father, John Tyson, that's a great book as well. And I love the rite of passage. And I don't know if you've read Love Does by Bob Goff, but he also talks about when his kids turn 10, they can do a trip. They can pick where they want to go. And his daughter was like, I want to go have tea with the Queen of England. So they went to England and had tea. They didn't have it with the Queen of England, but he did his best. And then his son wanted to climb Half Dome, I believe, in Yosemite. But his birthday was in February. So went in a blizzard and they tried and climbed Half Dome. And,
fun.
So I've been talking to my son already. He's 5. And I'm like, hey, buddy, when you turn 10, just me and you, and we're going to go on whatever trip you want to do. And ironically, you mentioned Egypt. He's like, I want to go to Egypt and see king cobras. And I'm like, well, we'll work a little bit more, on that and where king cobras live, but you never know. And so we'll see what happens, but it's great. And just being a dad is the best.
Good for you. I love it. And it sounds like you're doing it right.
Yeah.
We can turn this into a parenting podcast.
There you go. Hey, that's what really matters, though, to be honest, for sure, is kind of that time we have with family. And it all kind of boils back to financial freedom, right? And the ability to buy back your time so you can have time with your family and have more of those experiences. So it all relates. We'll tie it back in that way.
I like it. Very good.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aaron, you help physicians protect their income with disability policies and disability insurance. And for folks that are listening, this is educational only. This isn't personalized advice. But Aaron, do you mind just kind of telling us why? Why should physicians think about disability insurance?
Yeah, I mean, in broad strokes, I think you did a nice job on the intro of hitting it up. And people, are focused on their nest egg and their retirements, and their home is the biggest asset. But really, the engine that drives that boat is your ability to make money. And so physicians especially have spent all that time and energy just investing in themselves with school and for degrees that is a highly specialized degree. You need to protect that investment correctly with what's called a true own occupation policy. And so that's what I do, is specialty specific policies that just kind of help physicians protect what they've worked hard on. A lot of these policies are in addition to employer benefits, just because high income earners do not have enough coverage with only their employer benefits. They need their own policy to just kind of make sure things are fully protected. I have the advantage in sales of, doctors and dentists are just kind of told to buy these things. I mean, that's kind of the talk in residency program and in fellowships is like, hey, get this while you have discounts available. You're going to need it. You're going to be glad you have it. Everybody's got a story of a doctor they know that became, sick or injured or something happened. And I'm looking around now and I've got, a bunch of 40, 45-year-old friends. They've worked their way up to middle management. They're making decent income. There's 3 kids. And they're like, do I have now I maybe need to start thinking about it, because now I've got stuff to protect. Like the cliff was not there to realize, hey, my income was important. They just had to grind to get to that point. Doctors grind, and then now they're at the cliff and they need to make sure everything's kind of shored up and safe. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, like I said before, your income is kind of your number one wealth building tool until assets can replace that. And so that disability insurance is super, super important. And, I look at it as a tool, as you mentioned as well. Let's talk about some of the differences. So what are some of the differences or maybe mistakes that happen when physicians are looking for disability policies?
The number one mistake is just assuming that your employer benefits are going to be good enough. It's not bad to have an employer that gives you disability insurance. In fact, I think it's kind of nice to work somewhere that helps you subsidize your risk management plan that way. But employer benefits, I mean, you're going to have to be really disabled to receive those benefits. And a lot of people, some of your listeners on W-2s might not even realize their employer policy might cap off at $10,000 or $15,000 per month. I mean, your employer plan is also taxable. So, if you were really disabled on that plan, after taxes, you might end up with $90,000 a year, $100,000 a year. And that's a long ways off from kind of your monthly budget that's driving the ship. And so number one mistake is just relying on your employer benefits. Number 2 mistake is just waiting too long to get it. A lot of times people will come to me and they're changing jobs. The new place doesn't have disability insurance. It's their own gig. It's 1099 work, whatever it might be. But now we're shopping for a policy with no discounts or just health issues. There's things that are not disabling, but you've been to the doctor for some back pain or some anxiety. Like those things can limit what these policies cover. And so it's important that you get it set up kind of younger when you're younger and healthier.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there any specialty specific concerns like surgeons versus family med docs or folks who are more procedural compared to more outpatient clinic?
It's a nuanced question when people say these policies are specialty specific, true ONOC. I mean, the reality is the way the definition reads is what you're being paid to do for the last 6 to 12 months is actually your own job, right? And it's worded that way to protect people because people move into hospital administration. There's procedures that are not yet invented that these policies are going to cover that we don't even know about. And so you don't have to continually update your policy. It is easy for you and me and everybody else to kind of understand why a surgeon wants this type of coverage is because something could happen to my hands. We did have a doctor who slammed his hand in a car and he went on a claim for that. But it's easy to see why a surgeon who uses their hands all the time would want this type of coverage because you could receive total disability benefits on this policy and still work. I mean, that happens and that's how people understand the policies. But even a family medicine or psychiatrist, you don't want to sell themselves short. There's a lot required in you to do your job in terms of dictating, seeing patients, being able to, work long hours, that these policies could potentially pay those benefits while you're able to work somewhere else. But at the very least, it just kind of shores up that gap from the gap between any employer disability you have and what your take-home pay actually is can get shored up with one of these policies.
That's great. It sounds like definitely something worth folks looking at. Hey, what are your employer benefits? See, hey, does that come anywhere close to matching what your income is? Hey, look at the fine print of what that would actually cover for you. And then these policies can certainly be a good adjunct from that perspective. Another question that's, probably difficult to answer, but do you kind of have a goal for hey, how much coverage is quote unquote enough for a physician?
Yeah. There's a lot of clients on some other financial blogs that come to me, looking for this stuff. And so just so you get your listeners and you guys can just get some napkin math. I mean, let's just say you're dealing with a $300,000 contract. Okay. Generally speaking, you can get about 2/3 of your gross income protected. So being fully insured is having around $200,000 of disability insurance. Now, if you're making $600,000, I can't protect 2/3 of that the same way. They want to leave some incentive to get people to go back to work, right? And I should tell your listeners, because you guys have savvy clients, we're talking about earned income, not your passive income from real estate. This is earned income that you're getting paid for your time. So a $300,000 contract, we can get about $200,000 protected. But you look at the employer plan and, we find out it pays $10,000 per month and it's taxable. Well, that means you might end up with $90,000 a year from that employer plan. So that's going to leave another $120,000 a year that you could buy with a private policy if you wanted to. And I think that's what your question was, is what's the right amount? That's kind of a personal question because it's your own risk management plan. I will tell you, the policy is the most valuable now when you're young and you're healthy and you haven't fired yet. You've got the most income to lose at this point. And so I'll do whatever clients want. I probably, at the risk of my boss hearing me, I probably undersell some situations where, hey, if you don't want to be fully protected, I'm okay with that. I'm pretty risk tolerant myself. But, it's generally wise to get the right amount of coverage when you're the youngest, healthiest. That policy can be in place and protect you, and you can then not have to worry about increasing it or adding it later. You're set up when you need it the most.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. That's some great tips. How early can someone get this type of insurance? Is this something that you can get as an intern, or do you have to be graduated from residency?
If I could talk to med school students, I would love to. I mean, residency is the right time to buy it. So folks are told to buy this during residency and fellowship because there's big discounts available. And so, I would guess most of your listeners probably heard about buying it during training, and that's because you can get 20 and 30% discounts. I mean, they're stuck on the policy. They apply forever. Not to mention, if you do have, listeners in residency, like a lot of programs have what's called a guaranteed standard option. And so there's policies that they will give people without any underwriting at all. You could get a policy without having to do any health checks, and it's good own occupation coverage that you can take with you forever. Okay, so one, it's called a GSI is great if you're in residency and fellowship. It's a wonderful option. But two, you're just younger and healthier, and it's easier to get the coverage with the discount if you do it during training. If you decide to wait, no harm, no foul. It's just, you can just have a lot harder time getting approved for a policy or be a little bit disappointed with the price or the outcome.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it definitely sounds like the sooner, the better. If you're thinking about it, been thinking about it, don't wait much longer to at least take a look at this, because we never know, unfortunately, when disability may happen or when other health conditions may come up that impact your ability to get that policy. Are there any specific riders that physicians should consider?
Yeah, let me talk about riders in just a second, just because we were just on the topic of like underwriting, just so people know, like, these policies, when they're not guaranteed, the insurance company, they're going to look at prescriptions, they're going to look at medical records, they get a chance to look at things before they are willing to cover you. And so it might be that you can get a good policy. The policy is just going to come with exclusions for pre-existing conditions. And so, sometimes clients maybe had a season where they took some anxiety medicine, or they're currently expecting, or they had some wonky labs, and that can affect these policies if the timing isn't right for that sort of thing. And so those are the types of things that getting it earlier avoids. It's just disappointment. Like, yeah, I need a policy that covers my back because now I'm 45 years old and I know what a bad back injury kind of could feel like, and I could imagine a disability, like, I'm too late if I'm expecting to get coverage at that point in my life. So that's kind of what we're talking about with exclusions and underwriting. In terms of riders, there are a couple things that you should shop for, and this is pretty well documented online. I think that, physicians need to get what's called own occupation, and they need to get what's called true own occupation, which allows you to, double dip, for lack of a better word. You should look for a policy that's called non-cancelable, guaranteed renewable. That's just an insurance term that kind of locks things in for your benefit. The insurance company, they can't do a rate hike. If your policy is not non-cancelable, the insurance company could go to the insurance commission and say, hey, we're eating our shorts on these surgeons, or these 45-year-olds have a lot of claims coming in. We have to do a rate hike on this class of policy holders. And so if they get permission, they could raise your premiums. Well, if you purchase a non-cancelable, guaranteed renewable policy, your rates aren't going to change. The other riders that I think you need is called a residual or a partial disability rider. This is a feature which is really important because it pays for partial disabilities. And so you're still able to do your own job. Work in your own capacity, just not at the same extent. Maybe you have to cut back on your RVUs. Maybe you have 2 contracts, you can only do 1. You're working a lot of overtime, and now you're going back to just kind of like a regular work schedule. If there is a partial loss of income or duties because of an illness or injury, these policies will pay partial benefits. And that is money that employer policies don't pay. And so that's important to get on a policy. Another one would be a cost of living adjustment rider, which is inflation protection. There are disabilities that are permanent. When you're in your 30s, like, the only disability you can really imagine is like a car accident that takes you out of work for a really long time, and if that has happened, and if that happens and you're on a disability claim for 30 years, the benefit's going to grow and you're not going to be on a fixed income. So that's what the COLA rider does. There's also a catastrophic rider, which is extra money for bad disabilities. You could get student loan repayments. There's a few things like that you could add on, but the important ones are, I mentioned, and they're pretty well documented. Last one would be what's called a future purchase rider. And that's your ability to buy more coverage later without a health check. And so there are a couple different versions of that, but that is really important for your young listeners. Like, hey, I could just get this locked in And then as my income goes up or as my liabilities go up, when, Dr. Alex Schloe has 3 kids and some vacation properties, maybe you want a little bit more coverage, you could bump your policy up and they're not going to ask you any more health questions to do that.
That's really great. Those are some awesome tips for folks. So definitely make sure you're going back and listen to that section for sure. Aaron, what are some common traps that you see folks get into, whether that's like specific group policies or portability or any issues that you see or common traps that you see for folks?
I'm glad you asked that question, just because I've got one on recent, memory is, the trap is you get what you pay for with disability insurance. And so it's seeing that this cost is actually, real coverage that's real important. They say, 1 in 6 physicians are going to use their disability at some point in their career. And so the trap that people make is, maybe cutting it a little too short, not buying enough coverage or buying cut rate coverage. Like I had a client who said, "Hey, I'm ready to cancel the policy." I said, "Well, let's talk about it first." Well, some other agent showed her a policy that only pays a claim for 5 years, has no COLA rider. She can't increase it it looks like, and the premium gradually goes up. And so it looks like a good deal now where she's saving a few $100s a year, but in, 8 or 10 years from now, she's going to be on the other side of this policy. And so I think that's the biggest trap is, you're so focused on fire, you're so focused on, cash flow, that this expense is not really valued for what it is when we're kind of young and the liabilities are the highest.
Here's a quick reality check. If you are a physician building wealth through real estate, your biggest asset likely isn't your rental portfolio, it is your income. Financial freedom may only be a few properties away, but disability, that can wipe out the plan overnight if you're not protected. LeverageRx helps physicians get the right, true own occupation disability insurance, so your lifestyle, your family, and your investing plan stay intact no matter what. Go to LeverageRx.com/physicians and properties. That's LeverageRx.com/physicians and properties and protect the thing that funds everything. Yeah, that makes sense. What, if you can, is there kind of a ballpark number on what folks could expect this to cost? Say, I'm in residency, I'm healthy, and I'm a family medicine doc. What's a ballpark kind of cost for folks who are thinking about getting disability insurance at that point?
There are a few states like California where this is expensive. This is also more expensive lots more expensive for women than for men, unfortunately. Life insurance, the opposite is true. Disability insurance, like these policies are a little bit pricey. And then there's also a big difference between family medicine and emergency medicine. And so, it depends on what features you put on. As a resident, you could expect to spend anywhere from like $100 to $180 per month, kind of depending on a couple of those demographics. I will get a few policies that are close to $300 a month for a resident, and I usually just say, maybe we should think about waiting till you have the contract in hand. I was a teacher for a long time. I know the budget's tight. That's a big expense. As you become an attending, if we're missing out on discounts, I would say the average, $10,000 policy we're looking at is, gonna be around $300 per month. It just depends on a lot of factors. They usually say, 1 to 3% of your income is about right for these policies.
That's great. That's actually a lot cheaper than I thought that it would be. So that is great to hear. So yeah, definitely be thinking about that early on. I wish, I was thinking about this. I remember seeing on my reminders on my old iPhone, look at disability insurance, true own occupation disability insurance from when I was an intern. And I'll be honest, I never called. I never even thought about it again until now. And I wish I did. But I remember I probably still have it on my phone with the reminder from, I don't know, 8 years ago that said, look at this, and I did not. So don't be me, folks who are listening to this podcast. Well, let's talk about, physicians maybe that are like losing their employed roles or losing benefits. Does that impact these disability policies at all if they're moving to a different job, moving to a different state, or maybe they lost benefits or employee benefits?
There are a lot of ways to be optimal on that. And I mean, the other mistake, I guess the other trap from your earlier question is people will shop for the policy on their way out the door. Like I had a W-2 job, doing some procedural work, and there were employee benefits. I didn't need coverage. Now the new job is eat what you kill, and I've got no guarantees on somebody's income, and it's going to be really hard for the insurance company to give them the amount of coverage that they're really hoping to get. And so that'll be a situation where I'll see some mistakes get made because now I've got no discounts and no guaranteed income, and we're not going to be able to get the policy we were hoping for. When you get out, if it was easy for everybody to do it, I mean, you would see everybody doing 1099 work, right? The reality is that that's a hard thing to sort through. You've got to sort through the work, you got to sort through the taxes, you got to sort through the benefits. And so you are unprotected and you've got to make, decisions. These private policies that I deal with, most people pay for them out of pocket. It's not a business expense. The government's going to get you on one side or the other. And so if you pay for it out of pocket, then the benefits come to you tax-free. That's generally speaking, that's better. You could talk to your accountant about it. I think one of the questions with some of your listeners who are maybe, setting up their own clinics or entrepreneurial, they're writing people's paychecks, there's a lot to sort through in that where there are disability products that could help out employees or businesses that I could get into if you want me to.
Yeah, that'll be great. That was going to be my next question is how does this look for folks who own their own practice? Maybe it's a direct primary care practice or maybe it's their own private practice. Yeah, what does that look like for folks and potentially offering that as a benefit?
I like the DPC model. We do DPC for my family. And so
it's the best.
I love it. And we, at the office, I'm seeing a lot more like nurse practitioners and, PAs who are just kind of having to sort through the same thing we're talking about here. So a couple things, if you missed out on training discounts, but you have a couple employees and your employees, their income is also valuable. They maybe don't make as much, but doesn't mean there's not people relying on their paychecks day in, day out. Like they could benefit from these policies. And so what we'll sometimes do to maximize discounts is we could bring, 3 or 4 or 5 employees that all work in the same area into a policy, and we can get like an employer discount that way. And that's significant. And that helps out with a lot of people's savings. And that way the primary physician can get a policy that's discounted and can maybe subsidize or help out his employees to protect themselves moving forward. The other way we can do this is a business overhead expense policy. And so there are policies that will help keep the lights on for your business. And so if there was a permanent disability, that's a little bit different. But if there's a situation where you as the primary caregiver in this clinic or office are really the moneymaker of the office, like you could get a policy that'll pay for lights to stay on, payroll, other bills to just kind of give you a year or two to rest up and get better, right? Or maybe just bring somebody in and replace you. And so there's policies that'll help you keep your practice profitable during that rough season of life and just give you some on-ramp to make a wise decision on what to do with your business while it's still actually making money because the policy propped it up.
That's great. I didn't know that existed. That's a really cool benefit for folks, especially some of these solo, smaller practices. That can be certainly something worth considering. So thanks for sharing that, Aaron. What does it look like? Someone's listening to this podcast and they say, hey, I want to look into this. What does it look like for them in terms of, going on LeverageRx and figuring out a policy? How long does that process take? What can they expect from that perspective?
So getting quotes is easy. And I encourage people, go ahead and shop around because my take on this is going to be different than other people's takes. And one thing in the space you can't really, reproduce is just experience and touches. And so you want to find somebody that kind of understands your risk management plan and is willing to work with you in a plan that fits your budget. But the quotes between, broker to broker should look fairly similar. I mean, everybody has the same toolbox. And so we're all getting quotes off of the same software. And that takes me 10 minutes to go get you some quotes for coverage. It takes a little bit more time to understand what you're looking for. And then, once you kind of dial in how much protection suits your needs, there's 20 minutes to fill out applications, another, 20, 40 minutes to answer some health questions. And then that's when I go to work and just, if there's any medical records, if there's any questions the insurance company has, sometimes I need to collect income docs. I usually tell clients, we can get you approved for a policy, 2 to 8 weeks. Some of that just depends on how complicated health records look. But that's kind of what you're looking at before you're kind of on the hook to purchase coverage.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that summary. Well, Aaron, let's go ahead and kind of wrap things up. I got some kind of rapid fire questions for you that I didn't prepare you for, but I'm sure you'll crush it. So what are 3 myths in the disability insurance space that you want to kill?
The number one myth is your training discounts do not expire the day you leave training. So there is a grace period. There's time to get a policy with training discounts, even after you kind of get settled into your first attending job. That is one myth. The second, the other ones we've kind of talked about where your employer benefits are enough. That's not true. And then the third myth would be, that every policy is the same, That is a mistake that a lot of people make is they just assume, hey, I bought this policy, be it from my, in-law's cousin. He's new to the space. He's this agent at some financial firm. I think the myth is that financial advisors all look at this the same way. The reality is I work with physicians day in, day out and do hundreds of cases a year. That experience is a lot different than the financial advisor that, maybe works with 10 or 15 doctors, here and there. There's just a difference in understanding the nuances of these policies.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a specialist when it comes to this and really know all the nuances in the detail. And that's really important in a situation like this. And frankly, in a situation where we don't, until this episode, really as physicians understand what makes a good policy, what should I be looking at, what about the riders, what about all those sorts of minutia and details that we don't learn about in medical school, similar to, learning about anything financial related in med school, we don't get either. And so really, really important to work with someone who is a specialist. Aaron, what are 3 action steps that you would recommend listeners to take this week?
The first step would be just kind of assessing your own plan. If that means asking HR how much coverage you have, that would be step number 1 is, I'm assuming most of your listeners probably have term life insurance. That's an easy risk to understand, right? And so because you have term life insurance, you should also look at this. The chances of somebody dying are very small. The chances of you becoming disabled are 1 in 6. So just kind of reevaluate your risk management plan and see what kind of coverage do I already have, and do I need to add any more coverage? Step 2 would be just jumping online and learning more about this. There's tons of great resources online. If you came to LeverageRx, I love the teacher in me would really comes out and just kind of talking through these policies. And so learning more about it, so you understand the ins and the outs to see if it's something that would work. And then, step 3 would be talking to your spouse or your business partners and saying hey, how much coverage are we willing to purchase? And I'd say moving forward with something like that.
That sounds great. Aaron, what is one thing that you're passionate about right now?
Man, we started talking about the parent stuff, and that is, if I was like ChatGPT, I like just kind of consuming those books, taking that information, regurgitating it, figuring out what type of tips and tidbits from it I can use in my own house. And so, there's nothing more important than just being a good father. And so that's kind of what I'm passionate about right now.
I love that. One more book suggestion, if you haven't read it, it's just called Parenting by Paul Michael Tripp. It's Christian-based, really, really fantastic book. I learned a lot. I just finished it up and learned a lot. It was really enlightening and really highlighted that I need to work on patience some more. So I'm sure we can all probably work on that as parents, but that's something that I'm working on in 2026 is just being a little bit more patient with my kids.
Love it.
Awesome.
I'll tell you a good one. Have you read
Yeah.
Habits of the Household?
Yes, that's a great one. Absolutely.
Yep.
That is a great one. And then also, I was just thinking of another one that I read. Gosh, it's been a couple of years ago that was really good.
I read
that was similar.
Well, Shepherding a Child's Heart is one of the Tripp books. That's really good.
Okay.
The other one that we read that I thought was really helpful was, and it wasn't so much in the Christian space, but it was feeding the mouth that bites you, I think is what it's called, or feeding the hand that bites you. Yeah, and it's just talking about
awesome.
Teenagers. Yeah, and it's like, hey, I got these kids that are, a little bit rebellious and a little bit of attitude. And so how do I deal with them in a way that just respects their autonomy and gives them, essentially as parents, we're just trying to make sure our kids are in the right lane, moving at the right speed so that they can, get off the on-ramp and be successful in life, right? And that's what this book kind of talks about is, not to take some of that stuff personally and just set some good boundaries so that your kids can figure out how the authority works and move forward with success. So
that's great. Yeah. Well, thanks for all those recommendations. I'm going to add some of those to my list, and I'll be thinking about that when I get the next. Like, you're the meanest dad in the world, which I got the other day for the first time from my 5-year-old son who thinks he's 13. And I was like, here it goes. Here we go. Now it begins. I'm the meanest dad in the world.
Yeah. I said, you want to see mean? I thought North Omaha. You want to see mean? My skin is thick, son. I'm ready for this.
Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine the stories you have from teacher middle school. I remember all the shenanigans I got into in middle school, and I can't repeat them on the podcast.
I love it. Any more questions,
awesome.
Alex? I like those.
No, that was great, Aaron. I think, next steps would be, how can folks find you? How can they reach out to you if they want to know more and if they want to potentially work with you at LeverageRx?
Jumping on LeverageRx and filling out a quote form is fairly simple. Obviously, a quick 10 to 20 minute phone call answers most of the questions we need to get accurate quotes in front of people. And that's the first step. Just jump on LeverageRx and we can answer all the questions you have. I like that sort of thing.
That's great. Well, yeah, we'll be sure to include those links in the show notes, and really, really grateful to your team at LeverageRx to give us kind of a personalized link for Physicians and Properties. So folks, go ahead and click the link in the show notes if you're interested in learning more. And Aaron, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being an intentional father. And we need more and more intentional fathers out there, and excited to swap some more parenting stories down the road, but appreciate everything you do for physicians. And thanks for coming on the podcast tonight.
Alex, thank you. Keep up the good work. Love. I mean, sorry to steal your clothes here, but just the idea of your community, like the impact that being a landlord can have in a positive way. Like it's not just about like numbers and freedom, right? Like you're actually serving the greater good in a way that brings dignity and can help people. And so that's the kind of stuff that I know when we had rental properties, like we thought about, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be a blessing. And so keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, with that, it's been Aaron Brooker and Dr. Alex 𝗪𝗪 on another episode of the Physicians and Properties podcast, signing off. Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.